April 6, 2026, Boca Chica, Texas. A violent fireball tears across the Starbase testing site. Independent tracking networks capture every frame. Local observer Zach Golden calls it one of the most dramatic explosive events seen at the facility in recent months. And 3 days earlier, on April 3rd, Elon Musk had already announced that Starship version 3, the first flight of an entirely redesigned Raptor 3 booster and ship, was slipping to May, 4 to 6 weeks away. Posted to X, no advance briefing.
4, 3.
So here is the question that reframes the entire story. If the explosion happened on April 6th, but the delay was announced on April 3rd, what actually pushed version 3 off its April launch window? The answer is not a fireball. The answer is a regulatory gate, a newly built launch pad that refused to cooperate, and an engine architecture so violent it broke a test stand in Texas. This is episode 67. Drop a rocket emoji in the comments if you are locked in, and let's get into exactly what is happening at Starbase right now. What the fireball actually was. Let's start with what actually exploded, because the framing in a lot of coverage is misleading. The April 6th event was a component-level RUD, Rapid Unscheduled Disassembly, SpaceX's internal euphemism for a hardware failure that ends in a fireball, and it was violent. But here is what it was not. It was not a Starship upper stage. It was not a super heavy booster. The flight hardware for the 12th integrated test, Ship 39 and Booster 19, remained completely intact. Static fire testing continued in the days immediately after. Based on the operational tempo at Boca Chica, analysts concluded the explosion was almost certainly ground support equipment, a structural test tank pushed to failure, or an isolated pressurized system. SpaceX has not officially confirmed the specific hardware involved. Compare that to a real full-stack loss. On June 18, 2025, Ship 36 was completely destroyed on the test stand at the Massey's outpost while loading cryogenic propellants. A nitrogen composite overwrapped pressure vessel in the payload bay failed below its certified proof pressure. That rupture crushed the adjacent liquid methane tank. Massive fireball, heavy damage to pad plumbing. That was catastrophic. The April 6th event was not. And if you have not subscribed yet, 98% of the people watching this right now have not. Hit that button so you do not miss episode 68. The real reason for the delay. If the fireball did not cause the delay, what did? 3 things, and all 3 were already in motion before April 6th. First, Pad 2. SpaceX built an entirely new orbital launch mount at Starbase specifically engineered to handle the increased thrust and acoustic loads of the version 3 booster. Activation testing exposed groundside infrastructure issues immediately. A 10-engine static fire of Booster 19 on March 16th ended prematurely due to ground equipment anomalies. That triggered a rollback, modifications, and a multi-week delay before the 33-engine static fire could finally be achieved. Second, Raptor 3 integration. Version 3 is the first flight vehicle to carry the fully redesigned Raptor 3 engines. Qualifying 33 of them on a single booster for the first time does not happen on a fixed schedule. It happens when the data says it is safe. Third, and this is the hard gate, the Federal Aviation Administration. Following the 11th integrated flight test, the FAA mandated a mishap investigation related to an anomaly recorded around April 2nd. The exact technical nature remains opaque in public regulatory logs, but the protocol is ironclad. Kelvin Coleman, the FAA's Associate Administrator for Commercial Space Transportation, has held the line. Any vehicle iteration involving significant modifications, new engines, structural redesigns, altered flight envelopes, requires a comprehensive safety review and a formal license modification. Coleman's exact framing, quote, end quote. Translation. Starship version 3 does not launch until the FAA mishap investigation closes and Part 450 licensing is updated. SpaceX can build the hardware. They cannot launch it without federal sign-off. That is the real story. The April 6th fireball is dramatic B-roll. The delay was already locked in. The version 3 vehicle. Version 3 is not an iteration, it is a sweeping redesign. Stack height, 124.4 meters, 408 feet, over a meter taller than Block 2. The Super Heavy booster retains its 33-engine configuration. But every engine is now the new Raptor 3 variant, generating roughly 9,240 tons of combined thrust at liftoff. Propellant capacity has been vastly expanded. 2,300 tons of methalox, liquid methane and liquid oxygen, compared to roughly 1,500 tons on previous vehicles. That unlocks a theoretical payload capacity of over 100 metric tons to low Earth orbit in a fully reusable configuration. For context, that is more payload to orbit than the entire space shuttle program delivered in a single mission. Except version 3 is designed to return, refly, and do it again. The structural changes are extensive. A reusable integrated hot staging ring built to survive upper stage ignition. Redesigned forward flaps optimized for hypersonic re-entry. A reworked payload bay with a simplified PEZ dispenser mechanism designed to deploy Starlink version 3 satellites. And on the booster, grid fins enlarged by 50% and reduced in number from 4 to 3, each reinforced to function as a catch point for the launch tower's chopstick arms. Ship 39 and Booster 19. The two vehicles slated to fly IFT-12 have their own recovery story. Booster 18 was originally manufactured as the first version 3 flight article. In November 2025, during cryogenic pressure testing, the lower liquid oxygen tank crumpled. The vehicle is currently being scrapped. Booster 19 was accelerated through the Star Factory production line to replace it. It rolled out to Pad 2 in early March. The initial 10-engine static fire on March 16th ended prematurely. Ground equipment failure, not the vehicle itself. Then, on April 15th, the vehicle completed what SpaceX had been building toward for over a year, a full 33-engine static fire. The first time a complete complement of Raptor 3 engines had ever been fired simultaneously on a booster. Musk's response on X, quote, end quote. Ship 39 completed its own campaign at the Massey's test site. On April 14th, the vehicle executed a full-duration 60-second static fire using all 6 of its Raptor 3 engines. SpaceX officially described it as, quote, end quote. Both vehicles are ready. The launch pad is ready. The engines have fired. What is not ready is the paperwork. Raptor 3 and the McGregor explosion. The Raptor 3 engine is the technological core of the version 3 program. It is also the reason a test stand in Texas caught fire earlier this month. Sea-level thrust, 280 metric tons per engine, a substantial jump from the 230 tons produced by Raptor 2. Dry mass reduced to 1,525 kilograms, pushing the thrust-to-weight ratio to 183.6, unprecedented for a production liquid fuel engine. Using metal additive manufacturing, industrial 3D printing, SpaceX internalized the vast majority of secondary flow paths, fluid lines, and external sensors. Regenerative cooling channels are now integrated directly into exposed components. The result? Raptor 3 does not need the heavy secondary heat shields and fire suppression systems that cluttered earlier engine bays. But pushing methalox combustion at chamber pressures approaching 330 bar is exactly as violent as it sounds. In early April, at SpaceX's rocket development facility in McGregor, Texas, a Raptor 3 engine undergoing long-duration qualification testing suffered a catastrophic anomaly. A sudden fireball rapidly engulfed the test stand. No injuries. Emergency crews extinguished it quickly. But that explosion is a critical indicator. Even minor combustion anomalies at 330 bar can escalate into rapid test stand destruction in seconds. To date, SpaceX has produced over 600 Raptor engines across all variants, with more than 40,000 seconds of hot fire time logged on Raptor 3. The engine works. The engine is also still teaching SpaceX how to contain it. The Artemis pivot. The stakes on IFT-12 extend well beyond Starbase. They run directly into NASA's lunar program. Starship version 3 is the first variant designed with the propellant capacity and docking hardware to support in-space refueling, an absolutely mandatory requirement for the Human Landing System contract. Because Starship consumes the vast majority of its propellant simply reaching orbit, it requires a fleet of tanker Starships to top off its tanks before it has the Delta V to transit to the Moon. No version 3, no lunar Starship. The cascading delays, compounded by separate issues with Orion's heat shield, forced a major programmatic realignment. On February 27th, newly appointed NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman announced a complete overhaul of the Artemis 3 mission profile. Originally, Artemis 3 was slated to return humans to the lunar surface in 2026. Under the revised architecture, Artemis 3 is now a low Earth orbit rendezvous and docking test, delayed to mid-2027. Astronauts aboard Orion will launch on the Space Launch System and dock in orbit with SpaceX's Starship HLS, Blue Origin's Blue Moon Mark 1, or both.
I think, well, first of all, we are drawing on the playbook that worked incredibly well for NASA.
Isaac Mann's framing, quote, end quote. The first actual crewed lunar landing has been pushed to Artemis 4, tentatively targeted for 2028. Every month, IFT-12 slips. Artemis slips with it. The commercial stakes. NASA is not the only clock pressuring Starbase. The commercial side is arguably louder. SpaceX's current private valuation sits at approximately $1.75 trillion. That valuation is not supported by legacy revenue. It is supported by Starlink growth projections, and those projections depend on version 3. Each Starlink version 3 satellite has a mass of roughly 1,900 kilograms, too large to launch economically on Falcon 9. Version 3 Starship is specifically designed to move them. Its upgraded payload bay can deploy up to 54 per launch. The bandwidth math is staggering. A single Starship version 3 launch is projected to add 60 terabits per second of capacity to the Starlink network, more than 20 times what a Falcon 9 launch adds with older version 2 mini satellites. Financial analysts project Starlink will constitute nearly 80% of SpaceX's total estimated 2026 revenue. Every month version 3 is delayed translates into deferred network capacity, deferred subscriber growth, and deferred monetization ahead of a potential IPO. Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and chief operating officer, has projected a ramp to 400 Starship flights over the next 4 years. 2025 delivered only 5. The gap between stated cadence and actual cadence is where the pressure lives. The launch window. So here is where we stand. Ship 39 has fired. Booster 19 has fired. Pad 2 is operational. 600 Raptors have been built. 40,000 seconds of Raptor 3 hot fire time logged. The flight hardware is ready. What remains is the FAA mishap investigation, the Part 450 license modification, and the final integration milestones SpaceX has not publicly disclosed. Musk's 4 to 6 week window from April 3rd puts the earliest possible launch at the start of May. Realistic window extends into mid-May. When IFT-12 flies, it will not just be the first version 3 launch, it will be the first real test of whether SpaceX can translate a $1.75 trillion valuation, a lunar landing contract, and a global communications build-out into flight hardware that reaches orbit, returns, and flies again.